Alleluia, Alleluia. Everybody sing Alleluia, for the Lord has risen, it is true. Everybody sing Alleluia. 30 years he walked the land. Alleluia, Alleluia. To all in need he lent his hand. Alleluia, Alleluia, Alleluia. Everybody.
Today's video is based on a November 17, 1906 article that appeared in the Catholic Advance, Why the Latin Language is Used. The article was based on a conversation between a Protestant and a Catholic. But when I was reading the dialogue, I realized the Protestant's dialogue could easily be said by a Novus Ordo Catholic nowadays. So that's what I'm going to do here in this video. This conversation will be between Chad, a traditional Catholic, and his friend, Brad, a Novus Ordo Catholic.
I tried going to a Latin Mass a couple of weeks ago. There was bending and bowing, standing and kneeling, altar boys going here and there, tending to this and that, and swinging incense. The priest even had his back turned to me nearly the whole time. And then he spoke really low to himself, as if he didn't want anyone to hear. But the worst part was, the choir and the priest were all singing in Latin, and I couldn't understand a word of it. That was the worst part. So when I left the church after Mass, I felt quite puzzled.
I understand. I remember how puzzled I was at first. I think I felt a little bit like you did. But please tell me this. Did you look around you at the other people assisting at the Mass?
Yes, I did. There was nothing else for me to do. I couldn't understand anything else.
Did they seem as puzzled as you were? Or did they seem to know what was going on?
I thought they were kind of weird. The women were wearing veils and all of that. But I have to admit, they looked very attentive, and they seemed to be really saying the prayers and the responses.
Were there a lot of empty pews?
Actually, the church was packed. It made me feel a little uncomfortable having to sit so close to complete strangers. I'm not really used to that.
So, Brad, what do you think draws all these people to the Latin Mass? Somehow or other, this Latin, which seems to you to be so terrible, it neither frightens them nor puzzles them. Just because you're puzzled at the Latin Mass, it doesn't follow that others are puzzled too. But I have to admit that there probably were some people there that didn't understand much more Latin than you do. But they do understand the Mass itself. They have a love for the Latin Mass, and that's showed by the crowded traditional Catholic churches contrasted with the empty Novus Ordo churches. A Latin Mass brings together a reverent crowd praying together.
You're pretty hard on us, but there is some truth that the crowd at the Latin Mass was more reverent. Are there any other reasons for the Mass being in Latin?
If we were to judge things by their fruits, the fruit of the Latin Mass is much better than the fruit of the Novus Ordo Mass. Since the introduction of the Novus Ordo Mass, Catholics have simply stopped going to church. In the meantime, traditional communities are growing. And if this is true, then the Latin Mass cannot be such a terribly bad thing. Brad, I don't mean to be hard on you, but if you are puzzled by it, perhaps the fault might be your own. A little study on your part might make it as easy for you as it is for them.
But why make it harder on the people? Wouldn't it be much better in English?
Brad, there's no use for the Mass to be said in English. As we already established, the Latin Mass could not be any more devout than it was if it was said in English. We use English at the Novus Ordo Mass, and it hasn't made anything better. The Novus Ordo Mass is not the same as the Latin Mass. If your priest said the Novus Ordo Mass in Latin, it would actually be very absurd. But when a priest says the traditional Latin Mass in Latin, it's not absurd at all.
There's no difference between the Novus Ordo Mass and the Latin Mass.
Calm down, Brad. No offense is meant, but please tell me, what does your priest do at the Novus Ordo Mass?
He prays, he preaches, reads the Bible, and he distributes communion.
Do you usually receive directly from the hands of the priest?
No, usually an extraordinary minister hands it to me, but she seems very reverent.
Let me ask you another thing. Do most people who attend the Novus Ordo Mass believe in the real presence?
I do, but I've seen polls that say most do not.
Brad, did you know that the Novus Ordo Mass itself is illicit?
Illicit?
Yes. The Ascent of Mount Carmel YouTube channel has done a very persuasive series of videos on the topic. I think you should really check it out and subscribe.
Okay, Chad, if you say so, I'll check it out.
You should also check out his Twitter and Facebook pages. Every day he posts additional content that you won't find on his YouTube channel.
Okay, I will.
Brad, there's one more thing.
What's that, Chad?
Please pray for the church.